Ancient Egypt's greatest monuments guard secrets that defy all logic. We are about to journey through 25 of its most baffling enigmas, mysteries that stand in stark opposition to our textbooks and force us to question the very timeline of human achievement. You will discover evidence of impossible precision and knowledge that seems to belong to a different age entirely. How did a civilization carve perfect granite boxes weighing 100 tons with stone tools? Why does a temple wall appear to show a helicopter? The answers we think we have are crumbling. What part of our own history do you believe is still waiting to be uncovered? The Great Pyramid of Giza stands as a testament to an obsession with precision that borders on the supernatural. Its base is a near-perfect square, with its four sides aligned almost exactly to the four cardinal directions. The most staggering fact is its orientation to true north. The pyramid's sides are aligned with an accuracy of just 3/60ths of a single degree. To put that in perspective, this is a level of precision that would be impressive even with modern laser surveying equipment and satellite data. How could a civilization from 4,500 years ago, working with what we believe were copper tools and rope, achieve such an immaculate alignment? The common theory suggests they used the stars, perhaps tracking the circumpolar constellations as they rotated around the celestial pole. But this method introduces its own set of problems, requiring flawless observations over many nights and an engineering process to transfer that celestial alignment to the massive desert floor with zero room for error. Each cornerstone of the pyramid, some weighing more than 50 tons, had to be set with this impossible accuracy. The sheer scale of the project makes the precision even more baffling. We are not looking at a small, delicate instrument. This is a mountain of stone, 2.3 million blocks of it, arranged with the finesse of a master watchmaker. This has led to more controversial ideas. Could the builders have possessed a form of knowledge or even a technology that has since been lost to time? Perhaps they used a different, unknown method for surveying, one that we have not yet rediscovered. The alignment of the Great Pyramid is not just a single mystery. It is the first domino in a long line of impossibilities, forcing us to wonder if our understanding of ancient history is fundamentally incomplete. This obsession with celestial alignment is matched only by the mathematical genius frozen within the pyramid's very shape. The dimensions of the Great Pyramid seem to hold secrets that whisper of knowledge far beyond its era. Take a simple ratio, the pyramid's perimeter divided by its height. The result is not a random number. It is a value incredibly close to 2 times pi, the fundamental constant that defines the relationship between a circle's circumference and its diameter. The builders appear to have squared the circle, a geometric puzzle thought to be unsolvable, using a massive stone structure as their answer. This is not the only mathematical marvel. The proportions of the pyramid's passages and chambers often reflect the golden ratio, a number approximately equal to 1.618, revered for its perfect harmony in art and nature. Why would such advanced concepts be deliberately encoded into what is traditionally considered a simple tomb? The debate is fierce. Mainstream archaeology often attributes these findings to coincidence, suggesting that if you measure any large object enough ways, you will eventually find patterns that resemble known constants. Yet the sheer number of these mathematical correlations in the Great Pyramid makes that argument feel increasingly fragile. If it was intentional, the purpose is even more baffling. Was this a way for the builders to pass down a sacred geometry, a message to the future about the fundamental laws of the universe? Or does it suggest the architects possessed a scientific understanding that we have only recently begun to comprehend ourselves? This is not just stone and mortar. It feels like a library written in dimensions, a permanent record of a wisdom that we are still struggling to read. This mathematical perfection carved in stone gives way to an even deeper enigma buried beneath the sand. Deep below the sands of Saqqara lies a place that defies all conventional understanding of ancient Egyptian capabilities, the Serapeum. This is not a tomb for kings, but a colossal underground network of tunnels and chambers, each one housing a single, breathtaking object. Inside are 24 gargantuan boxes, carved from a single piece of solid granite, each one weighing close to 100 tons. To stand before them is to feel profoundly small. The official explanation tells us these were the burial vaults for the sacred Apis bulls, revered animals that were mummified and entombed with great ceremony. But when you look closer, this story begins to unravel at the seams. The surfaces of these boxes are not merely smooth, they are flawlessly flat and polished to a mirror finish with corners that are perfectly square. This is a level of precision machining that we would associate with a modern manufacturing facility, not the work of artisans wielding copper chisels and stone hammers. How could they have achieved such a perfect glass-like surface on one of the hardest stones on Earth? The logistics are even more baffling. Each box had to be quarried from a distant location, transported miles across the desert, and then, most impossibly, maneuvered down into these narrow, cramped underground passages. Imagine the challenge of lowering a weight equivalent to a fully loaded commercial jetliner into a confined, subterranean space, all without damaging the box or the tunnel walls. The sheer physics of the operation seems to border on magic. Then there is the ultimate question: where are the bulls? Many of these immense, perfectly crafted sarcophagi were found completely empty. Not a single bone, not a trace of a mummy, not even the residual organic material that would be expected after thousands of years. If these were indeed ceremonial burial vaults, why were so many never used? This glaring absence has fueled alternative theories that the Serapeum's true purpose was something entirely different. Could these boxes have served another, more advanced function that we have yet to comprehend? Perhaps they were not containers for the dead, but for something else entirely, something that required an airtight, precision-made seal of solid granite. The empty boxes stand as silent, monumental questions, challenging us to look past the traditional narrative and ask what incredible knowledge might have been lost to the ages. From these silent, empty boxes, we move to a temple wall etched with an image that seems to scream an impossible truth. Deep within the Hathor temple at Dendera, a stone relief depicts a scene that has ignited fierce debate for decades. It shows a large, glass-like bulb, rounded at one end and fitted into a socket. Inside this bulb, a snake stretches its body in a straight line, its head pointed toward the narrow end. A cable, clearly carved, leads from the base of this object and connects to a box, upon which a priest appears to be standing. To any modern eye, it is unmistakably a giant light bulb. The mainstream explanation is one of mythology, not technology. Egyptologists state this is a representation of a creation myth, showing a divine snake, a symbol of the god Horus, being born from a lotus flower, which is the socket-like base. The cable is interpreted as a ceremonial rope, and the entire scene is said to depict a spiritual, not an electrical, event. Yet, this interpretation feels unsatisfying to many. Why does the snake inside the bulb look so rigid and wire-like, so different from the sinuous, living serpents carved elsewhere in Egyptian art? The entire composition, from the socket to the cable to the supporting box, feels too mechanically precise to be purely symbolic. This has given rise to the extraordinary theory of ancient electricity. Proponents point to a small clay jar discovered in Baghdad known as the Baghdad Battery. This artifact, dated to the Parthian period, consists of a copper cylinder and an iron rod inside a clay pot, which, if filled with an acidic electrolyte like vinegar, could have produced a small electric charge. While its actual purpose remains unknown, its existence hints that the basic principles of electrochemistry might not have been entirely foreign to the ancient world. This theory attempts to answer one of Egyptology's most practical and persistent questions. How did the artists and scribes who worked deep inside the pitch-black tombs of the Valley of the Kings or the windowless chambers of the Great Pyramids achieve their work? The walls are covered in perfectly executed hieroglyphs and paintings, with no traces of soot from torches or oil lamps found on the ceilings. Could they have been using a form of electric light, perhaps powered by primitive batteries and channeled through devices exactly like the ones shown at Dendera? The idea seems fantastical, a leap across millennia of scientific progress, but it forces us to confront a simple, logical problem. How do you illuminate vast, intricate works of art in total, subterranean darkness without leaving a single mark of your light source behind? The Dendera relief stands as a permanent challenge, a silent question carved in stone that asks us if we have underestimated the spark of genius in the ancient world. The silent questions carved at Dendera are matched by a deafening one left in stone at Aswan. Here, carved directly into the living bedrock of a desert quarry, lies the Unfinished Obelisk. It is a single piece of red granite intended to stand over 130 feet tall and weigh an almost unimaginable 1,200 tons. This monument was never freed, its form cracked and abandoned, offering us a frozen moment in time, a perfect case study of ancient ambition and its staggering methods. Looking at the trenches carved around it, we can see the only tools the workers had: simple balls of dolerite, a stone harder than granite. Teams of men would have swung these stone hammers, pounding away for months, maybe years, to create a single trench just a few feet wide. The process was one of unimaginable patience and brute force. To split the stone from the bedrock, they likely drove wooden wedges into channels and then soaked them with water. As the wood expanded with tremendous force, it would crack the granite along a precise line. This was a technology of pure physics, a deep understanding of material properties, but it raises a far greater mystery than how they quarried it. How did they ever intend to move it? A block of stone this size is not just heavy, it is a small mountain. The logistics defy belief. The most common theory involves a fleet of massive barges during the Nile's flood season, and an army of workers dragging it on a lubricated causeway. But even with thousands of men and ropes, the physics of lifting such a weight onto a barge, or preventing it from sinking irretrievably into the mud, seems nearly impossible. And then the final act, erecting it, setting a 1,200-ton needle of stone perfectly upright without it shattering on impact, is a feat that would challenge modern engineers with hydraulic cranes. The crack that doomed the obelisk was a blessing in disguise for us, for it preserved the evidence of their methods. But its very existence forces us to ask, if this one failed, how many others like it succeeded? What forgotten engineering genius allowed them to complete these tasks, not once but repeatedly, raising obelisks that still stand today in the squares of Rome and on the banks of the Nile? The quarry at Aswan does not just hold a broken stone, it holds the ghost of a process so effective we can barely comprehend its full scope. While the quarries of Aswan reveal the scale of ancient ambition, the Valley of the Kings conceals its complexity deep underground. Here, across the river from the grand temples of Luxor, pharaohs chose to hide their eternal resting places within the heart of a desolate mountain. This was not simple cave digging. This was the creation of a precise, multi-chambered subterranean palace, carved with impossible symmetry hundreds of feet down into solid limestone. The engineering begins with the initial shaft. Workers had to cut a perfectly square or rectangular tunnel, plunging straight down or at a steep angle, maintaining their exact dimensions through the unpredictable rock. One wrong calculation, one misaligned strike, and the entire tomb could collapse or veer hopelessly off course. Yet the walls of these tombs are smooth and true, the corners sharp as if cut by a machine. The logistics of waste removal are staggering in their own right. For a single large tomb, workers had to excavate and remove hundreds of thousands of tons of rock and debris. All of this rubble had to be hauled up from the deep, narrow passages in baskets, carried through cramped tunnels, and then discreetly dumped in nearby ravines to leave no trace of the hidden tomb's location. It was a monumental effort of hidden labor, but the true mystery shines from the walls themselves. Every surface, from the deepest burial chamber to the highest corridor, is covered in vibrant, intricate art. The hieroglyphs are crisp and deeply carved. The paintings of gods and goddesses are filled with complex, perfectly blended colors. This artistic perfection presents the central enigma. How was this masterwork achieved in near total darkness? The tombs are deep, winding, and windowless, far from any natural light. The traditional explanation of flickering oil lamps or torches creates more questions than answers. Such open flames would have consumed precious oxygen, making it difficult to breathe in the confined spaces. They would have produced thick, black smoke that would have coated the pristine white ceilings in layers of soot, yet no such residue has been found. The light from a simple lamp is also uneven and wavering, casting dancing shadows. How could artists achieve such straight lines, such perfect symmetry, and such minute detail in a dim, unstable glow? The precision of the work demands a steady, bright, and clean light source, something that simply does not fit with the tools we have attributed to them. This forces us to revisit the haunting image from Dendera. Could the answer to the darkness of the Valley of the Kings be found in that carved relief of a glowing bulb? The empty, silent chambers of these tombs hold their secret tight, a secret written in light that vanished, leaving behind only the impossible art it helped to create. But the precision of the tombs pales before the mystery of a monument standing in plain sight. The great Sphinx of Giza, that colossal lion with a pharaoh's head, guards a geological secret that threatens to rewrite history. The controversy centers not on the statue itself, but on the deep, undulating channels carved into the limestone walls of its enclosure. According to Boston University geologist Robert Schoch, these are not the marks of wind and sand. That kind of erosion creates horizontal, sharp-edged features. What we see on the Sphinx enclosure are vertical, rolling, wave-like patterns with distinct scoops and fissures. This is the unmistakable signature of water, and not just a little rain. This is the result of prolonged, heavy downpours, rainfall that would have pounded the rock for centuries. Here is the staggering implication. This type of wet climate last existed in Egypt thousands of years before the Sphinx is traditionally dated to the Old Kingdom, around 2500 BC. For the water erosion theory to be correct, the Sphinx must be far, far older, potentially dating back to a time around 7000 BC or even earlier, a period when mainstream archaeology tells us only simple Neolithic hunter-gatherers inhabited the region. The idea of a sophisticated civilization capable of carving the Sphinx existing that far back is utterly revolutionary. Mainstream Egyptologists offer a powerful counterargument. They point to the complex funerary architecture surrounding the Sphinx, which is definitively linked to the pharaoh Khafre of the 4th dynasty. They argue that the weathering can be explained by a combination of factors, including the poor quality of the limestone, which is naturally prone to flaking, and the effects of wind, sand, and even chemical weathering from salt and pollution over the millennia. They maintain that the archaeological context is clear and overwhelming, placing the Sphinx firmly within the known timeline of ancient Egypt. Yet, the geological evidence remains a silent, physical fact that refuses to fade away. The debate is more than an academic quarrel. It is a fundamental clash between two different ways of reading the past. Do we trust the man-made objects and inscriptions found around the monument, or do we trust the story told by the stone itself? The Sphinx, as always, offers no answers, only a deeper, more profound silence. The silent stone of the Sphinx guards a riddle of time, while another mystery whispers from the missing face of a queen. Nefertiti, whose name means the beautiful one has come, was far more than a pretty image. She was the great royal wife of the pharaoh Akhenaten, a co-ruler during one of the most dramatic religious revolutions in history, when Egypt turned its back on its old gods to worship a single sun disk, the Aten. In art, she is depicted with a power almost equal to her husband's, smiting enemies and performing rituals. And then, around the 12th year of Akhenaten's reign, she simply vanishes. The historical record goes silent. No death is recorded, no tomb is declared. It is as if she walked off the stage of history mid-performance. So what happened to the most powerful woman in Egypt? One theory is that she died, perhaps from a plague or in childbirth, and her burial was kept secret or later destroyed. Yet no definitive remains have ever been found. Another compelling idea is that she fell from grace, exiled for reasons lost to time. Her name systematically erased from monuments in a classic act of damnatio memoriae. But the most revolutionary theory suggests she never lost power at all. Some Egyptologists propose that after Akhenaten's death, Nefertiti ruled Egypt herself, not as queen, but as a full pharaoh under a new name, Smenkhkare. This would explain the confusing succession of rulers at the end of the Amarna period, and why the mummy of a young pharaoh found in tomb KV55 has been the subject of such intense debate, with some analyses suggesting it could be her. This theory transforms her disappearance from a tragedy into a political masterstroke, a woman so powerful she had to become a king to secure her legacy. The hunt for her final resting place has become a modern obsession. For years, archaeologists have scanned the Valley of the Kings with ground-penetrating radar and thermal imaging, searching for hidden chambers behind the walls of Tutankhamun's tomb, believing she might be buried there just out of sight. Every anomaly in the data sends a ripple of excitement through the world. The search continues, a high-tech treasure hunt for a queen who mastered the art of vanishing, leaving behind only her stunning bust and a question that has endured for over 3,000 years. Where is Nefertiti? The mystery of a vanished queen is overshadowed by the ominous legend of a dead king's revenge. When Howard Carter unsealed the tomb of Tutankhamun in 1922, he unleashed more than just golden treasures into the world. He triggered a story of a pharaoh's curse, a warning that death would come on swift wings to those who disturbed the royal rest. The legend began with a series of strange and untimely deaths. Lord Carnarvon, the financial backer of the expedition, died just months after entering the tomb, succumbing to an infected mosquito bite that turned into blood poisoning and pneumonia. At the exact moment of his death in Cairo, the lights reportedly flickered and went out across the city. Back in England, his dog was said to have let out a howl and dropped dead. The sensational press ran wild, linking the deaths of others connected to the tomb, from a radiologist who X-rayed the mummy to a relative who died by suicide, weaving a narrative of supernatural vengeance. But how much of this was fact and how much was fiction crafted by newspaper salesmen? The truth is far more fascinating than the myth. Science offers compelling explanations for the so-called curse. Sealed for over 3,000 years, the tomb became a perfect breeding ground for ancient bacteria and toxic mold. Air samples revealed potentially deadly spores of Aspergillus niger, a fungus that can cause fatal respiratory failure, especially in individuals whose immune systems were already compromised. Lord Carnarvon, for instance, was in chronically poor health. For the ancient Egyptians, this was not a supernatural trap, but a practical one. They may have intentionally placed molds and toxic substances like mercury or uranium in the paint on the tomb walls as a biological deterrent to protect the sacred space from thieves. The psychological power of the curse cannot be underestimated either. Suggestion is a potent force. If you believe you are cursed, the stress and fear can manifest in very real physical ways, weakening the body and mind. The curse was also a brilliant piece of social engineering, a story passed down to instill a holy terror in the local workforce, ensuring they would not reveal the tomb's location or plunder its riches. This pattern of protective warnings is found in other tombs, with inscriptions explicitly threatening desecrators with a terrible fate. So was the curse real? It was real in its consequences, a perfect storm of ancient biology, modern media sensationalism, and deep-seated human fear. It stands as a timeless reminder that some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. While the curse of a boy king captured the world's imagination, an even grander wonder has vanished almost without a trace. Ancient writers spoke with awe of a structure so immense, so complex that it dwarfed the pyramids. Herodotus, the Greek historian who walked Egypt in the 5th century BC, claimed he saw it with his own eyes. He described a colossal labyrinth near Lake Moeris, a building with 3,000 rooms, 1,500 above ground and 1,500 below. He wrote that the roofs were made of stone, the walls covered with carved figures, and that a series of interconnected courtyards and passages were so bewildering that no one could navigate them without a guide. He was so overwhelmed by the scale and artistry that he declared it surpassed even the pyramids. Centuries later, another historian, Strabo, also reported seeing this monumental complex, confirming its legendary status in the ancient world. For a long time, modern scholars dismissed these accounts as the exaggerations of dazzled tourists, a mythical place born from tall tales. Then, archaeologists began to dig at a site called Hawara. What they found was not a myth but a foundation, a vast grid-like base of stone stretched across the desert, a footprint so enormous it could only belong to one building, the legendary labyrinth. The scale matches the ancient descriptions, confirming that this was a real place, an administrative and religious center of almost unimaginable size, likely connected to the pyramid of Amenemhat III. The discovery solves one mystery only to create a far deeper one. If this labyrinth was real and so much more impressive than the pyramids according to eyewitnesses, why is it now a few scattered stones in the sand? Why did it disappear so completely when the pyramids, thousands of years older, still stand? The pyramids were built as eternal monuments, their simple, robust shape defying the ages. The labyrinth, however, was a complex, multi-level structure with countless walls and chambers. It was far more vulnerable. The most likely answer is systematic quarrying. For centuries, the Romans and later builders saw the labyrinth not as a treasure to preserve, but as a convenient quarry of pre-cut, high-quality stone. They dismantled it block by block to build their own cities and temples, scavenging until almost nothing remained. But the purpose of the labyrinth is as mysterious as its disappearance. Was it a giant administrative center housing every single nome or province of Egypt and its local gods? Was it a pilgrimage site where priests performed secret rituals in its bewildering passages? Or was it, as some have speculated, a final resting place for the sacred crocodiles of the god Sobek, a zoo and mausoleum of epic proportions? We may never know what wonders its 3,000 rooms once held. The lost labyrinth of Egypt stands as a ghost in the historical record, a testament to the fact that the greatest marvels can be erased by time, leaving behind only a whisper and a foundation that hints at a grandeur we can barely comprehend. The ghost of the labyrinth reminds us that entire worlds of knowledge can vanish, yet sometimes the sea gives up a secret. In the year 1901, sponge divers off the coast of a small Greek island named Antikythera discovered a shipwreck. Among the bronze statues and marble sculptures, they found a lump of corroded bronze and wood that seemed utterly unremarkable. It was only decades later, when X-rays peered inside, that the world saw its true nature. This was the Antikythera mechanism, an intricate clockwork device of at least 30 intermeshing bronze gears, housed in a wooden case the size of a shoebox. It was, in essence, an ancient analog computer, a machine of staggering complexity designed to predict the movements of the sun, moon, and planets, and even forecast eclipses. For a long time, it was considered a singular Greek marvel, an outlier in the technological record. But the deeper researchers looked, the more a shadow of another civilization appeared behind its intricate gears. The Egyptian connection is subtle but compelling. The device used a sophisticated calendar to track the cycles of the sky, and one of the primary calendars it employed was the Egyptian calendar. This was a simple, stable 365-day calendar, far more reliable for long-term astronomical calculations than the messy, variable lunar calendars used elsewhere in the ancient world. The mechanism also predicted solar and lunar eclipses with remarkable accuracy using a cycle first identified by Babylonian astronomers. But the very need for such a precise, portable astronomical computer hints at a legacy of observation that stretches back further. Could the knowledge required to conceive of such a device, the deep understanding of celestial mechanics, have been cultivated in the temple observatories of ancient Egypt? The Greeks themselves credited Egypt as the source of their earliest astronomical knowledge. This device feels like the culmination of centuries, perhaps millennia, of watching the stars, a practice the Egyptians perfected. The true mystery of the Antikythera mechanism is not just its existence but its isolation. This level of mechanical engineering and scientific integration would not be seen again until the astronomical clocks of medieval Europe over 1,000 years later. How could such a profound technology appear and then simply vanish from the historical record? It suggests a flash of genius, a school of thought that was snuffed out, perhaps by war or the collapse of a civilization that nurtured it. The ship that carried it was a Roman vessel looting the treasures of the Greek world. Was the mechanism itself a treasure, a prized secret from the great library of Alexandria, which was said to hold the sum of ancient knowledge? Its discovery forces a humbling realization. We assume a linear progression of technology, a steady climb from simple to complex. But the Antikythera mechanism stands as a stark anomaly, a peak of achievement that was later lost. It whispers that the scientific landscape of the ancient world was far more advanced and far more fragile than we have ever dared to believe. Carved high on a wall within the temple of Seti I at Abydos, a set of hieroglyphs presents a puzzle that seems to leap across millennia. To any modern observer, the shapes are unmistakable. There, clear as day, is the silhouette of a helicopter, its rotor blades and tail boom perfectly defined. Right beside it, you can make out the form of a submarine, a jet plane, and even what looks like a futuristic spacecraft. This is not a blurry, ambiguous mark. The lines are crisp and deliberate, looking entirely out of place amidst the traditional symbols of gods and pharaohs. How could such images exist in a temple built over 3,000 years ago? The mainstream explanation offered by Egyptologists is one of practical archaeology, not science fiction. They identify this as a perfect example of a palimpsest. In ancient times, when a ruler wanted to claim a monument, they would often plaster over the existing carvings and recarve them with their own name and titles. At Abydos, it is believed that the original hieroglyphs commissioned by Seti I spelled out his formal titulary. His son, Ramses II, later had this plastered over so he could inscribe his own name in the same sacred space. Centuries later, that plaster fell away, but it did not fall away cleanly. It chipped and eroded in such a way that it selectively removed parts of both the older, deeper Seti cartouche and the newer, shallower Ramses cartouche. The result is a bizarre, accidental fusion of the two sets of hieroglyphs. The overlapping lines and curves from symbols meaning things like "He who repulses the 9 enemies of Egypt" and "the strong bull" merge to create the entirely coincidental yet stunningly accurate shapes of modern vehicles. It is a fluke of epigraphy, a Stone Age Photoshop glitch, yet for those who question this official story, the coincidence is simply too great. Could the human mind, even through random chance, produce such clean and recognizable forms of technology that would not exist for another 3,000 years? This has fueled the extraordinary alternative theory that the carving is not a mistake at all, but a deliberate record. Perhaps it is evidence of a lost, advanced civilization that possessed such machines. Or, in an even more mind-bending possibility, Could it be a sign of time travelers who visited ancient Egypt, their vehicles so imprinted on the culture that they were recorded in the most permanent way the people knew how? The palimpsest theory is logical and grounded, but it fails to satisfy the deep, unsettling feeling the image provokes. It confronts us with a choice. Do we accept the straightforward explanation of overlapping stone and faded plaster, or do we allow our minds to wander into the realm of the impossible, to a past that might have been far more complex and mysterious than our history books can contain? While we stare at the impossible perfection of its outer shell, the Great Pyramid guards its ultimate secret deep within its core. Modern technology has peeled back the stone to reveal that this ancient wonder is not a solid mass, but a structure honeycombed with hidden spaces. Using a technique called muon radiography, which is like a cosmic X-ray, scientists scan the pyramid by tracking subatomic particles called muons that rain down from the atmosphere. These particles pass through empty space easily but are absorbed or deflected by dense stone. By mapping where the muons go, researchers can see the pyramid's internal structure without drilling a single hole. What they found was staggering. High above the Grand Gallery, a cavernous space was detected, a void so large it has been named the Big Void. This is not a small crack or a builder's niche. It is a confirmed, defined chamber over 100 feet long. Its purpose and contents a complete mystery. Another significant void was found near the original north face, hinting at a network of passages we never knew existed. So what lies inside these sealed rooms? The possibilities ignite the imagination. Could the Big Void be the true, final burial chamber of the pharaoh Khufu? A room so sacred and hidden that it was never meant to be found, leaving the so-called king's chamber as a decoy for tomb robbers. Perhaps it is not a tomb at all, but a sealed repository, a time capsule holding the lost knowledge of the pyramid's builders. Imagine scrolls of papyrus, tools of an advanced technology, or artifacts that could rewrite our understanding of human history, all preserved in a dry, dark space for 4,500 years. The desire to know is overwhelming, but the path to an answer is blocked by immense challenges. Drilling even a small borehole to send in a camera is an incredibly delicate operation. One wrong move could trigger a structural shift, damaging the monument forever. And then there are the politics. The Egyptian authorities are rightfully protective of their national treasure, weighing the immense value of a discovery against the irreversible risk of damage. Permissions are entangled in bureaucracy and a deep-seated caution. The world watches as teams propose ever more ingenious, non-invasive ways to peer inside, from thermal scanning to tiny, agile robots. But for now, the voids remain silent and inaccessible, their secrets held in a perfect, dark equilibrium. The greatest monument of the ancient world has proven it still has rooms we cannot enter, questions we cannot answer, reminding us that the most profound mysteries are often the ones hidden in plain sight. But these monumental achievements all point to a deeper and more fundamental enigma. Where did the Egyptians themselves come from? The origins of this civilization are a profound historical mystery, a story of a sudden genesis that defies the usual slow crawl of human development. Around 3200 BC, something remarkable happened along the Nile. What had been a collection of scattered, Neolithic farming villages transformed, almost overnight in archaeological terms, into a unified, sophisticated kingdom. This was not a gradual evolution, it was a big bang. Suddenly, there was hieroglyphic writing, a complex and complete system from its very first appearance. Suddenly, there was a centralized government led by a god-king, the pharaoh, capable of mobilizing thousands of workers. And suddenly, there was a mastery of monumental architecture with massive stone tombs and temples rising from the desert. How does a society leap from simple mud brick huts to the conceptualization of the pyramid in what seems like the blink of an eye? The mainstream theory posits a steady, indigenous development. Scholars point to the pre-dynastic cultures of Naqada and Badawi, which show increasing social complexity, better pottery, and trade with neighboring regions. They argue that the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt under a single king, Nama, was the culmination of centuries of internal social and political ferment. In this view, the civilization was homegrown, a natural product of the Nile's fertile bounty which allowed for surplus food, specialization of labor, and the slow accumulation of knowledge. But for many, this explanation feels incomplete. The jump in scale and sophistication is simply too vast. The pre-dynastic cultures show no clear, linear progression toward the administrative genius required to build the first dynasty state. It is like finding the blueprint for a modern computer chip in a workshop that had only just invented the wheel. This gap has fueled an alternative and highly controversial theory. Could a catalyst from outside have sparked this incredible transformation? The idea of a lost civilization, perhaps even the fabled Atlantis, influencing the Nile Valley is a persistent one. Proponents point to the similarities between early Egyptian culture and other contemporary advanced societies, like the Sumerians in Mesopotamia, wondering if a common, older teacher existed. They ask a simple, haunting question: is the entire timeline of human history wrong? Could there be a forgotten epoch, a golden age that was wiped clean by a global cataclysm like a comet impact or a great flood, whose survivors seeded their advanced knowledge among the emerging cultures of the world? The archaeological record, by its very nature, is a collection of fragments. It is possible that the evidence for such a precursor civilization, if it existed on coastlines now submerged by rising sea levels, is simply lost forever beneath the waves. The truth is, we may never know for certain. The genesis of Egypt stands as a silent challenge at the very foundation of our history, a reminder that some of the most important beginnings are often the most obscure. The same hands that raised impossible monuments also practiced a medicine that feels centuries ahead of its time. Tucked away in the archives of history is the Edwin Smith Papyrus, a medical text so pragmatic and precise it could almost be a modern field guide for trauma surgery. This is not a collection of spells and incantations, but a systematic clinical manual. It details 48 cases of injuries, fractures, and wounds, moving methodically from the head down to the spine. For each case, the ancient physician is guided through a logical process: examination, diagnosis, prognosis, and then treatment. The text coolly categorizes injuries into 3 verdicts: an ailment I will treat, an ailment I will contend with, and an ailment not to be treated. This final category shows a stark understanding of medical limits, acknowledging when a spinal cord injury was so severe that any intervention was futile. The procedures described are remarkably advanced. They explain how to set a broken nose using 2 plugs of linen inserted into the nostrils, how to suture a gaping wound, and even how to diagnose a dislocated jaw by the sound it makes when the patient speaks. The knowledge of the human body is unnervingly accurate. They understood that the brain was the seat of motor control, with one case noting that an injury to the temporal lobe of the head would cause the patient to walk dragging his foot. They described the meninges, the layers surrounding the brain, and the cerebrospinal fluid. This is not guesswork, it is the result of direct hands-on observation. Yet this creates the central paradox. How did they acquire this intimate knowledge of anatomy, of the brain and the spine, without a tradition of systematic human dissection? Their religious beliefs held the body sacred, necessary for the afterlife, making the act of cutting it open taboo. So where did this empirical, almost scientific, understanding come from? The most plausible theory points to a long, unrecorded period of intense observation. These early doctors were likely battlefield surgeons, field medics for the immense construction projects where crushing injuries and fractures were common. For generations, they must have studied the effects of trauma, meticulously recording what they saw when a skull was fractured or a bone shattered, building a library of practical knowledge through sheer repetition and note-taking. But this rational world of medicine existed side by side with a belief in the supernatural. In the same era, the Ebers Papyrus prescribes magical incantations to cure diseases, blaming ailments on wandering wombs or evil spirits. A physician might set a compound fracture with impeccable technique one day and recite a spell to drive a demon from a feverish child the next. This duality is the true mystery. It reveals an ancient mind perfectly capable of empirical science, yet still comforted by the power of magic. They were standing at a crossroads, one path leading toward a medicine based on evidence, the other rooted in tradition and the unseen world. For a brief moment, captured in the crisp hieratic script of the Edwin Smith Papyrus, it seemed they were walking decisively down the first path. We are left to wonder what would have happened if that journey had not been interrupted, and what other secrets of the human body they might have unlocked. This mastery of medicine and the human body stands in stark contrast to the sheer brute force required to move mountains of stone. Consider the two colossi of Memnon, two seated statues of the pharaoh Amenhotep III, each one a breathtaking 700 tons of solid quartzite stone. They were not carved on site, they were quarried from a single piece of rock over 400 miles away, dragged across the desert, and somehow erected on the Theban plain. The logistics of moving such a mass are almost incomprehensible. The prevailing theory involves a massive sledge, a flat wooden platform upon which the statue was secured. This sledge was then pulled, likely by teams of hundreds, if not thousands, of laborers. But pulling a 700-ton block on a sledge across sand is not like pulling a sled across snow. The friction is immense. The leading theory suggests workers would have laid a path of wooden tracks, lubricating them with water or perhaps a slurry of mud to reduce the dragging friction. Even with this system, the physics are staggering. To move a 700-ton weight on a lubricated sledge over a level surface would require a constant pulling force equivalent to the combined effort of over 1,500 strong men, all pulling in perfect unison. A single misstep, a snapped rope, and the entire operation could end in disaster, and that is just for moving it on flat ground. How did they get these blocks onto the barges that carried them down the Nile? This required building a massive, reinforced causeway out into the river and then, through a system of levers and counterweights, tipping the statue onto the waiting boat without capsizing it. The challenge becomes even more dizzying when we look at the pyramid blocks. While smaller, they were moved in far greater numbers. Modern experiments have tried to replicate these methods with mixed results. Teams have successfully moved smaller replicas on lubricated sledges, but scaling this up to the true weight of the colossi presents new problems. The pressure on the wooden tracks would be so great they could splinter. The ropes, even those made from the strongest papyrus and hemp, have a tensile strength limit, and you cannot simply attach more ropes indefinitely. There is a physical cap on how many people can effectively pull on a single object before they get in each other's way. Some alternative theories propose that the Egyptians used a system of wooden rollers instead of a sledge, but rollers have their own critical flaw. The immense weight of the statue would crush the rollers into the soft desert ground, creating deep ruts and halting progress. To prevent this, you would need a continuous road of solid wooden planks, a project almost as monumental as moving the statue itself. So how did they do it? The truth is, we do not have a definitive answer that satisfies all the physical constraints. It is a puzzle of manpower, ingenious engineering, and a profound understanding of practical physics that we are still trying to decode. The silent, seated colossi are more than just statues. They are a permanent testament to a logistical genius that we can only stand before and wonder at. Amid the colossal statues and towering pyramids, the most enduring Egyptian symbol could be held in a single hand. The Ankh, that elegant cross with a teardrop loop, is everywhere. It is offered by gods to the lips of pharaohs, clutched tightly by royalty in statues, and painted on tomb walls with a promise of life beyond death. Yet for all its familiarity, its origin is a complete mystery. Why this specific shape? Why did it become the ultimate emblem of life itself? Some linguists suggest it might be a stylized sandal strap, a mundane object whose knot represented the binding of life to the body. Others see it as a magical knot, a symbol of secure union. There are theories linking it to the Nile's vital flood cycle, with the T-shaped cross representing the delta and the loop the eternal river flowing from it, a union of land and water that gave Egypt life. But these practical explanations feel almost too simple for a symbol of such profound power. Its use was pervasive and potent. In temple reliefs, a deity holding an ankh to a king's nose was not just a gesture, it was the literal gift of the breath of life, animating his very soul for eternity. It was the key that unlocked the door to the underworld, painted on coffin lids to guide the deceased. This idea of the ankh as a literal key opens a door to more esoteric interpretations. Could its shape be more than symbolic? Some researchers point to its resemblance to certain molecular structures or even a stylized representation of the human form, with arms outstretched and a head looped in eternal energy. There are fringe theories that propose the ankh was not just a symbol, but a functional object, a tool for harnessing a cosmic energy or a tuning device for spiritual frequencies, its true purpose lost when the civilization that mastered it fell. The orthodox view dismisses this as fantasy, insisting it was purely a religious icon. Yet the nagging question remains, how did one simple shape come to hold such unified meaning across 3,000 years of history, representing everything from physical existence to divine power to eternal salvation? The ankh's silent elegance belies a deep secret. It was the ultimate currency of existence, and we are still deciphering what it truly bought. This symbol of life itself points toward a city that gave birth to a nation, a place that has since vanished from the earth. Ancient texts speak with reverence of Thinis, the legendary first capital of a unified Egypt. It was here, tradition says, that the first pharaohs of the first dynasty ruled, and it was here they were laid to rest in a sacred necropolis. This was the foundational heart of the entire civilization, the very seat of power from which the concept of Egypt was born. Yet today we have no idea where it is. The city of Thinis is a ghost, a name in old books with no physical location on any map. How can a place of such immense historical importance simply disappear? The clues we have are entirely textual. The writings of Manetho, an Egyptian priest from the 3rd century BC, explicitly name Thinis as the origin of the first dynastic rulers. Later Greek historians also mention it, but they provide frustratingly few geographical details. The most tantalizing clues come from Egyptian sources themselves, like the pyramid texts, which reference the Thinite region as a spiritually significant domain of the dead. For a long time, archaeologists believed the key to finding Thinis lay in linking it to a known, but poorly understood, ancient cemetery. The vast burial ground at Abydos with its early royal tombs seemed like the perfect candidate for the lost Thinite necropolis. If the kings were buried at Abydos, the logic went, then their capital city must have been nearby. This theory placed the search in the general region of modern-day Girgah, where the ancient and modern names are thought to be linguistically linked. Yet, decades of excavation and surveying around Girgah have failed to produce any definitive evidence of a major, sprawling early dynastic capital. Archaeologists have found remnants of ancient settlements, but nothing on the scale that would match the glorious city described in the text. This creates a profound and unsettling enigma. How could a city of such political and ceremonial magnitude leave so little trace? The most likely answer is also the most destructive. Thinis was probably built not from stone but from mud brick. While the pyramids were meant for eternity, the cities of the living were constructed from perishable materials. Over 5,000 years, mud brick melts back into the earth when abandoned. especially if a city was located on the fertile floodplain where annual inundations and centuries of farming would have systematically erased all surface evidence. The city may not be hidden, but rather completely dissolved. Modern technology has renewed the hunt. Teams now use satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar to scan beneath the fields and modern towns, searching for the telltale outlines of foundations and streets that are invisible to the naked eye. Every anomalous reading sparks hope. The search for Thinis is more than a treasure hunt for a lost city. It is a quest for the very origin point of Egyptian statehood. Finding it would be like discovering the birthplace of a world-changing idea, the physical room where it all began. Its continued absence is a powerful reminder of the fragility of our past. Entire chapters of human history, even the capitals of great empires, can be wiped clean from the landscape, leaving behind only a name and a mystery that calls to us from the dust. While the search for lost cities continues on Earth, the ancient Egyptians left their most profound questions carved in the silence of the royal dead. Deep within the pyramids of the 5th and 6th dynasties at Saqqara, the walls are not blank. They are covered from floor to ceiling in columns of intricate hieroglyphs, a sprawling tapestry of words known as the pyramid text. These are the oldest religious writings in the world, a collection of over 700 spells, incantations, and rituals whose primary purpose was to serve as a divine guidebook for the soul of the departed king. Their goal was nothing less than to secure the pharaoh's safe passage through the terrifying dangers of the underworld and his ultimate rebirth as a star in the night sky, or as an equal to the sun god Ra himself. The texts are a chaotic and deeply mysterious journey. One spell might be a simple protective charm to ward off snakes, while the next describes the king flying to the heavens on the wings of a falcon or ascending a ladder held by the gods. They speak of a celestial realm where the deceased pharaoh must plead his case, fight off demons, and navigate a landscape of fire lakes and divine gatekeepers. This was not a peaceful afterlife of rest, but an active, perilous, and cosmic adventure that the king had to successfully complete. The sheer antiquity of these texts is staggering, but it raises a critical debate that divides Egyptologists to this day. Were these spells original compositions from the 5th dynasty, or were the scribes merely carving copies of a much older, oral tradition that had been passed down for centuries, perhaps even millennia? The language itself provides the first clue. The grammar and some of the phrasing used in the pyramid texts is archaic, even for the Old Kingdom, suggesting the scribes were working from source material that was already ancient in their own time. Some spells contain references to rituals and beliefs that seem completely out of place in the sophisticated state religion of the Pyramid Age, hinting at a far more primal, shamanistic past. This has led many scholars to propose that the pyramid texts are a frozen moment, a snapshot of the very earliest Egyptian beliefs about death and the cosmos, beliefs that were formalized and written down for the first time only when the need to protect the divine king became paramount. They are a window into a pre-pharaonic worldview, a time when magic and mythology were raw, immediate, and untamed by the rigid structure of the later Egyptian state. If this theory is true, then these carved walls are more than just funerary instructions. They are the surviving fragments of a lost wisdom, a spiritual inheritance from a forgotten age that defined the soul of a civilization for the next 2,000 years. The silent chambers of the Saqqara pyramids do not just hold the bodies of kings, they hold the echoing voice of Egypt's own Genesis, whispering secrets we are still learning to hear. While the pyramid texts charted a soul's celestial journey, another ancient story tells of a very earthly cataclysm that nearly ended Egypt itself. At the end of the Bronze Age, the entire eastern Mediterranean world was plunged into chaos. Great empires like the Hittites in Anatolia and the mighty city-states of Mycenaean Greece collapsed into ruin, their palaces burned and their trade networks shattered. Out of this smoke and fire sailed a terrifying and unknown force, a confederation of warriors that Egyptian inscriptions named only the Sea Peoples. They arrived not as a single army, but as a swarm of different tribes, moving by ship and by land with their families and possessions in tow, a massive, desperate migration armed for war. They struck at the very heart of the Nile Delta during the reign of Pharaoh Ramesses III, threatening to extinguish Egyptian civilization forever. The pharaoh met this existential threat head-on, and he immortalized his victory on the massive stone walls of his mortuary temple at Medinet Habu. These reliefs are our most detailed visual record of the conflict, showing a brutal, chaotic naval battle. Egyptian archers rain arrows down from their ships upon the distinctive vessels of the Sea Peoples, which have high, bird-headed prows. The invaders wear horned helmets or feathered headdresses, and they carry round shields and long, straight swords. The scenes are a tableau of violence and desperation, showing the Sea People's ships being capsized, their warriors being captured, and their people being led away in bondage. Ramesses declared he had saved Egypt from annihilation, and the temple walls stand as a permanent monument to his triumph. But these carvings, for all their detail, only deepen the central mystery. Who were these people? The Egyptians meticulously recorded the names of the tribes in the coalition, names like the Peliset, the Shekelesh, and the Denyen. To modern historians, these names ring faint bells of recognition. The Peliset are almost certainly the Philistines who later settled on the coast of Canaan. The Shekelesh might have come from Sicily, and the Denyen could be the Danaioi, a name Homer used for the Greeks, but this is where the clues become a tangled web. Were the Sea Peoples a cause of the Bronze Age collapse, or were they a symptom of it? What immense pressure could force so many diverse groups from their homelands all at once, setting them on a collision course with every established kingdom in their path? One of the most compelling theories points to a dramatic climate change event. Tree ring and ice core data from this period suggest a prolonged, severe drought that would have led to widespread crop failure and famine. This environmental catastrophe could have shattered the fragile economies of the Bronze Age, creating a domino effect of starvation, internal rebellion, and mass migration. People who could no longer feed themselves took to the sea, becoming pirates and invaders in a desperate fight for survival. Another theory suggests they were displaced by the violent upheavals in the Aegean and Anatolia. Perhaps even victims turned aggressors, pushed from their burning cities to seek new lands elsewhere. They were not a unified nation, but a perfect storm of human desperation. A coalition of the uprooted whose collective violence helped usher in a dark age that lasted for centuries. Their true identity remains one of history's greatest ghost stories, a puzzle of sunken ships and vanished homelands. Carved into the ceiling of that same Hathor temple at Dendera, far above the enigmatic light bulb relief, lies another masterpiece that maps the heavens with impossible precision. This is the Zodiac of Dendera, a sprawling circular bas-relief that is not merely a collection of stars, but a sophisticated chart of the constellations, including the 12 signs of the zodiac we recognize today. It shows the ecliptic, the sun's path across the sky, with the planets moving through the houses of the zodiac in a precise celestial dance. Yet the most staggering feature is not what it shows, but what it implies. The arrangement of the constellations suggests the Egyptians understood the concept of the precession of the equinoxes, a slow, grand wobble in the Earth's axis that causes the position of the stars to shift over a cycle of approximately 26,000 years. This is knowledge that requires observations meticulously recorded over centuries, even millennia, to detect. The official dating of the ceiling places it in the Greco-Roman period around 50 BC. But this date is the heart of a fierce controversy. The celestial map depicted does not match the sky of 50 BC. Instead, it seems to be a snapshot of the heavens from a much earlier epoch. Some argue as far back as 11,000 BC. This suggests the ceiling is not an original creation of its time, but a copy of a far more ancient chart, a preserved fragment of a lost astronomical tradition. How could a civilization without telescopes, without advanced mathematics as we know it, achieve such a profound understanding of cosmic cycles? Their tools were deceptively simple. They used sighting rods called Merkit and carefully aligned temple corridors to track the rising and setting of specific stars like Sirius. They built structures whose very alignments acted as a permanent observatory, marking solstices and equinoxes with beams of light. This was a long game of observation, a sacred duty carried out by generations of priest astronomers who recorded the slow drift of the sky on papyrus scrolls now turned to dust. The zodiac of Dendera stands as a fossilized moment in deep time, a challenge to our linear history. It whispers that the roots of astronomy may sink far deeper into the past than we ever believed, preserved in stone by a civilization that looked to the stars and saw not just gods but the turning of a cosmic clock. This same sense of an impossible process emerges when you examine the very fabric of the Great Pyramid. On some of the massive core stones, hidden from view for millennia, are strange erosion patterns that defy simple explanation. This is not the familiar, sand-blasted smoothing of wind or the sharp fractures of thermal stress. Instead, the granite and limestone appear to have been weathered in a way that suggests the stone itself was once soft, almost like wet clay or melting wax. The surfaces are deeply pitted and flow in undulating, almost liquid formations, as if the rock had been subjected to a force that made it pliable before it hardened again. Mainstream geology struggles to account for this. The standard explanation points to centuries of water seepage and chemical weathering, but this feels inadequate. How could water alone create such dramatic, localized softening on some of the hardest stones on Earth, while leaving adjacent blocks with sharp, clean edges? The peculiar nature of this erosion has ignited more speculative theories. One of the most controversial ideas proposes that the pyramid builders possessed a lost chemical technology. Perhaps they used a plant-based solvent or a mineral compound that could temporarily reduce the crystalline structure of granite, allowing them to mold and fit the multi-ton blocks with a precision that stone tools could never achieve. This would explain the mind-boggling joints between certain stones, fits so perfect you cannot slide a razor blade between them. An even more radical theory suggests the use of sonic or acoustic technology. Could the ancients have discovered a specific resonant frequency that caused stone to vibrate and become fluid? We know that sound can affect materials. Modern experiments have shown that certain frequencies can make sand form intricate patterns or cause water to levitate. Is it so far-fetched to imagine a civilization that mastered harmonic vibration on a grand scale, using it to soften and sculpt stone as if it were putty? This would not be magic, but a sophisticated application of physics we are only beginning to rediscover. The mainstream scientific view, of course, remains deeply skeptical, attributing the patterns to well-understood, if unusual, geological processes. Yet when you stand before a stone that looks like it was poured rather than carved, the official story can feel hollow. These silent, melted stones are a physical testament to a method we cannot replicate, a ghost of a technology that challenges our most fundamental assumptions about how these impossible structures were ever built. The very bodies of the pharaohs are now yielding secrets that written history never recorded. Modern science has turned its focus to the genetic code locked within the royal mummies, creating a field of study as contentious as it is revealing. The quest to sequence ancient Egyptian DNA is fraught with immense challenges. The hot climate of Egypt and the chemical processes of mummification itself work to break down DNA over millennia, making contamination from modern sources a constant threat. Every step, from unrolling the mummy to extracting a viable sample, risks introducing the DNA of archaeologists, curators, or even the very air of the museum, potentially scrambling the results beyond repair. This has led to fierce debates within the scientific community. with some researchers questioning the validity of any genetic findings from such degraded material. Yet, against these odds, several studies have managed to sequence genomes, and the results are shaking the foundations of Egyptology. One of the most startling revelations involves the ancestry of the pharaohs themselves. Analysis of mummies from the New Kingdom period, including the family of Tutankhamun, has shown a surprising level of genetic affinity, not just with populations from the ancient Near East, but also with parts of southern Europe. This genetic portrait paints a far more interconnected ancient world than we previously imagined, a world where the Nile Valley was a vibrant crossroads of continents, its royal houses linked by marriage and diplomacy to distant powers. This directly challenges the traditional and often romanticized view of an ethnically homogeneous, isolated Egypt. The controversy is not merely academic. It touches upon modern debates about identity and ownership of history. For generations, the narrative of ancient Egypt was framed as a distinctly African civilization, and these genetic findings have been misinterpreted by some to argue otherwise, creating a firestorm of public and scholarly debate. The truth, as always, is more complex. The genetic data does not erase the African roots of Egypt, but rather layers it with a history of migration and exchange. It suggests that the ruling class was a dynamic and diverse group, their power and lineage shaped by a web of international relations that stretched across the Mediterranean. The mummies, once thought to be silent effigies, are now active participants in a difficult conversation. They force us to ask, what does it truly mean to be an Egyptian pharaoh? Was their authority derived from a pure, unbroken lineage, or from their role as the central node in a vast intercontinental network? The DNA does not provide easy answers, only a more intricate and fascinating puzzle written in the very cells of the kings and queens who built an empire. This simple wooden coffin seems to shatter our entire timeline of technological progress. It belonged to a priest named Bacon Mut from the 21st dynasty, a man of modest status buried in an otherwise unremarkable funerary box. Yet, attached to its lid is a small, unassuming piece of metalwork that should not exist. It is a functional, intricate metal hinge, a technology we associate with the Iron Age or even later periods, not the Bronze and Copper Age of ancient Egypt. This is not a decorative inlay or a symbolic fitting. It is a practical, mechanical joint designed to allow the lid to pivot smoothly, a concept that requires a sophisticated understanding of pivot points, friction, and metal durability. The implications are staggering. This single hinge suggests the Egyptians possessed a knowledge of metallurgy and practical engineering that far surpasses what we have credited them with. They were not just pounding soft copper into statues and jewelry. They were crafting precise, moving parts, solving problems with solutions that feel centuries ahead of their time. Why would such an advanced feature appear on this one ordinary coffin? If this technology was common, we would expect to find hinges on chests, temple doors, and furniture everywhere. But we do not. This makes Bacon Mut's coffin a profound anomaly. It hints at a brief flash of genius, a localized workshop where a master artisan experimented with and perfected a technique that was never widely adopted, a spark of innovation that flickered and then was lost. Perhaps the knowledge was a guarded secret, passed down through a single family of metalworkers whose lineage died out. Or maybe the resources required were too scarce, the specific alloy too difficult to produce in large quantities. This tiny, silent hinge is a fossil of a different path, a road not taken in the history of technology. It forces us to ask what other inventions, what other brilliant solutions were discovered by the ancients only to vanish without a trace, leaving behind only the faintest of clues in the most unexpected of places. This final mystery asks how a civilization that built for eternity could so suddenly fall apart. The end of the Old Kingdom was not a gradual decline, but a total systemic collapse. For centuries, Egypt had been the very definition of stability, ruled by god-kings who commanded the labor to raise mountains of stone. Then, around 2100 BC, the central government in Memphis simply ceased to function. The state dissolved, and the country plunged into the first intermediate period, a dark age of chaos, famine, and civil war that lasted for more than 100 years. The grand architectural projects stopped, not just paused, but the very knowledge of how to build them seemed to vanish from the land. So what could have shattered a kingdom so completely? The evidence points to a perfect storm of catastrophes. Climate science, drawn from ice cores and sediment layers, reveals a devastating mega-drought that gripped the region for decades. The lifeblood of Egypt, the annual Nile flood, failed. The river did not rise to water the fields, leading to repeated crop failures and widespread famine. The pyramid texts, once a guide to the celestial afterlife, now spoke of a more terrestrial horror, with inscriptions from this period describing people eating their children and the land screaming in grief. This environmental disaster broke the back of the pharaoh's divine authority. If the king was a god who ensured the flood and the harvest, what did it mean when the fields turned to dust and the people starved? His power evaporated. At the same time, a political revolution was unfolding. For generations, the pharaohs had granted massive estates and power to provincial governors to manage the kingdom. As the central government weakened from the famine, these regional rulers, no longer reliant on Memphis for their authority, began to act like independent kings. They raised their own armies, built their own fortifications, and stopped sending taxes to the capital. Egypt fragmented into a patchwork of feuding states, each fighting the other for control of what little resources remained. The most baffling aspect of this collapse is the technological amnesia. The techniques for quarrying, transporting, and erecting massive stones, knowledge so painfully acquired over centuries, was lost. When the country finally reunified and entered the Middle Kingdom, the pyramids they built were smaller, cruder, and constructed with mud brick cores instead of the immense, precise stonework of their predecessors. It was as if the blueprint for greatness had been misplaced. How does a society forget how to build the very wonders that defined it? The collapse of the Old Kingdom stands as a haunting lesson in the fragility of civilization. It demonstrates that no kingdom, no matter how mighty or seemingly eternal, is immune to the combined forces of a changing climate, political ambition, and the simple, desperate need for food. The silence that fell over the building sites was as profound as any curse, leaving us to wonder if our own modern world, for all its technology, could ever face a similar forgetting. 25 enigmas stand as a chorus of questions against the certainty of our history books. From the impossible precision of the Great Pyramid to the melted stones that hint at a forgotten science, each mystery carves away at our comfortable timeline. We are left with the overwhelming sense that ancient Egypt was not a primitive beginning, but perhaps a magnificent and tragic ending, a peak of achievement built upon knowledge we can no longer access. These are not just puzzles to be solved, they are profound challenges to our entire understanding of human progress. They whisper that our past is far deeper, far stranger, and far more mysterious than we have ever allowed ourselves to believe. So we turn this final question over to you. Which of these 25 mysteries captivates your imagination the most? Does the geological riddle of the Sphinx rewrite our history, or does the empty, polished perfection of the Serapeum boxes point to a lost technology? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this journey into the unexplained has left you wanting more, be sure to subscribe for our next exploration into the greatest secrets of our world.